the first step is ethics by commitment or by pledge. And then by process, by certification, and furthermore by regulation. But right now what I want to explore is phase number 1, which is ethics by pledge. This is the 8 commitments that I currently have on the website that you can actually go in and pledge for that. And we're going to see it on a use case, which is basically an automated prediction for an insurance calculator. So if you want to get life insurance, you normally would have to get kind of like a background check, and some people with tons of years of experience that are probably like 40 years older than you guys would go into all these records and trying to make a decision of what number makes sense for you. But in this case, let's assume that we've created a system, a machine learning system, that you give it your profile and it basically predicts how much your insurance should be. And what are the kind of like implications that we should take into consideration? So let's see the 8 implications. So to ensure augmented as opposed to artificial. So when I talk about AI, I try to push more towards augmented intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence. Machines are dumb. They're silly. They're not the smartest things, and it's ultimately the people that make them capable. What would be bad in this perspective is to just use predictions without checking. What would be better, and see that I'm not saying good or perfect, what would be better is that you actually have a sign-off process with a human at the end. And that's what we always do. So in the insurance process, you put the predictions in front of a human and then they make the decision. The second one is, awareness of bias in data. And I guess this should be a GIF of them discussing whether it's Android or Apple that is better. But this is basically, a naive perspective. It's just taking all the data and just training on all of it. And why is this bad? Because it can have a bias. You may have data that is collected that may have more data from man than woman. Or it may have more from an ethical background than another. And the algorithm just learns. And it will become biased. So you need to take an understanding on this. And what would be better is if you actually have a look at your entire data set and make sure that you pick an understandable and a comprehensible set of inputs to train your model, and that you run some comprehensive tests around it. From the job displacement implications, you're going to be optimizing a lot of the processes. If you just push unconsciously for automation, it wouldn't be great. What would be better is if you understand and address the automation implications. For example, we're automating lawyers, but ultimately we realize that by decreasing the costs of legal services, the total demand for legal services increases, which means that more people will be using our tool to actually deliver these services. So you need to understand how you're going to rescale the individuals. And then in terms of accuracy, what is bad is if you just take the naive accuracy number, right? Like, the total good ones versus the total bad ones. What would be better is to understand the actual F1 score, different scoring metrics, what actually reflects more into the practical, human sign-off process, which, in our case, we have multiple scoring metrics. In the case of insurance, you would want to have not just, is it this number or this number, but more of like, what is the cost of like somebody in this situation versus like this other person, etc., etc. Awareness and plan for an audit trail. So, the bad thing would be just like overriding your models, not really having the stored outputs, how they relate with your data. And what would be better is actually to store your label data with a change log of your work, so that you can actually understand who made what changes, when, why did something become a way, why was something predicted a way, da-da-da-da-da. So I think that's super important to have. Backwards compatibility and versioning, to ensure that all of your previous models won't be reused. That would be a very bad assumption. You need to make sure that the things that you deploy, and this is basic software practices, right? Is you deploy a new API, you would expect people to actually plug into the API, and whenever you release a new version, I'm now realizing that putting GIFs is now driving all the attention to the GIF as opposed to the ethical implications. You guys are going to be like, oh my god, what decision do I make? Oh, I can only think of Legos. Oh no. So let's pay attention on this on this perspective. So number 7, transparency on metadata collection. So this is back to assuming all stakeholders understand the data is the worst thing you can do. Better would be to provide comprehensible breakdowns on how you're planning not to just store their data, but what metadata are you going to be using it for. before. You know, Facebook, when they pulled them into doing the hearing, they were like, oh, we don't sell your data, what you're talking about. And that's true, but ultimately they sell services on top of your data. And, you know, are we cool with that? Well, maybe, but, you know, we need to have a discussion about it instead of just, you know, pointing fingers. And then the last one is, you know, identifying kind of like cybersecurity risks. And, you know, you want to make sure that you are able to protect from, you know, cyber attacks. And we all know that cyber attacks look like that. In a bad situation is when you're like, oh, I'm doing machine learning, you know, what cybersecurity implications? But in reality, you saw that, you know, actually models are statistical kind of like functions that you are able to trick. So you need to understand what is the testing that you can put behind it and what is the training that you can have to your staff so that they can avoid any social engineering implications. And yeah, you've completed phase 1.